Bro, I've lived a lot of life, man. And when are we as a society just gonna move past scumbag television? Like, we have to have scumbags as the main characters and rehabilitate them. Like, there is some societal need for us to take the most morally reprehensible human beings, put them on a show, and somehow humanize them and make them likable. I don't understand why. I don't understand why. Sometimes it's interesting. This is not one of those times. Unfortunately, it's a reboot which missed the point. Cruel Intentions. Okay, everything about the show is built on the game between Caroline and Lucien. Essentially, Caroline wants Annie Grover, daughter of the vice president, to pledge to her fraternity for reasons that are a bit convoluted. But essentially, after a hazing incident when somebody got hurt, the school decides to crack down on the fraternities and sororities. So, in order to make her sorority bulletproof, Caroline wants the vice president's daughter to pledge. She enlists her playboy stepbrother, Lucien, to seduce Annie into joining by making a deal to sleep with him if he completes the task. You know, the usual shit. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this show is probably terrible. You wouldn't be completely wrong. However, I will say that there are some positives to this show. There are some things that I did take away that I liked. There's some story arcs that I thought were pretty compelling. There were some characters that I thought were pretty interesting. The show isn't god awful, but it's not that great. And if you watch the show, you're going to quickly start to recognize and realize that the side characters are much better than the main characters somehow. I mean, their story arcs are more compelling. Like, take Blaze, right? Blaze's story arc is, I think, the best one of the story. He's presented to us as this, like, super rich elitist, just like all the other guys in the story. And he has this weird relationship with Scott. You know what I mean? Him and Scott are both gay, and Scott doesn't really understand if he's gay or not. Like, he's kind of, like, trying to figure it out, but Blaze is very much clearly, you know what I mean, part of LGBTQ+. And they're both kind of hiding it from Scott's dad, who's a conservative congressman. And you're never quite sure if he's, like, using Scott, because he's constantly trying to angle his way to getting a job with this, like, conservative congressman, right? And Scott is kind of positioned to be this, like, really dumb frat bro that kind of doesn't know his head from his ass. But it's super interesting watching those two interact with each other, because you really think that is just one-sided. Like, you know what I mean, Scott cares about Blaze, and, you know, he calls him his best friend, tells his parents he's his best friend. Blaze, like, hangs out with him, but Blaze is just kind of just manipulating him the whole time. And I feel like that arc was probably summed up the best at the end. And you kind of feel for Scott, because you're like, oh damn, this dude was, like, actually emotionally invested in the other guy, and, like, the guy ends up being a complete piece of shit, which I thought was a really compelling story, because Blaze is the most compelling character in the story. He has the best arc. He is a thief. He's stealing money because he has to keep the facade of being rich, because his family is essentially broke. And it kind of shows in the story how it's so important to not be at the bottom. These people need to be at the top, and what they'll do to maintain power. And I think it was kind of telling when Lucien found out that Blaze has been embezzling money from the fraternity, that when Lucien says, oh, I'm not going to say anything to anyone, first thing Blaze says is, oh, what do I owe you? What do I have to give you? What do you want? You know what I mean? Like, this is so transactional. Like, no one actually cares about anyone. And it's so messed up, because, like, the people they manipulate the most are the people who are usually not morally bankrupt. Like, the fact that he's even able to steal is because no one thinks that he's broke. Everyone thinks that, oh, wow, he's super rich. Why would he be stealing money from these reimbursement checks? And it shows how important the facade is, but also how consuming it is, and how much work it takes to maintain the mask that they have to keep up all the time. And I love the ending of his arc, where he goes to Scott's dad as, like, a last-ditch effort to essentially blackmail this congressman by saying, like, hey, I'm going to tell everyone that your son is gay, just to find out that Scott was in the other room telling his dad that, oh, hey, he's in love with this guy and he's his best friend and he wants to be with him. And now his dad knows that, oh no, this kid's a real piece of shit. And it essentially tells you what I think the story was trying to convey, with all those moves, all that scheming, all that manipulation and everything like that was just defeated in one moment because the truth. And that's it. And I think it was a really interesting character arc. Similar to Cece, the neurotic, exposition, monologue heavy sidekick to Caroline, right? Essentially, she's positioned as Caroline's, like, minion or some sort, but really what happens is that her character arc really starts when she meets Professor Chadwick, and it's super interesting because like their relationship and their romance is the most compelling part, or the most compelling romance in the story. They're the ones who I believe would try to get together. Both of those actors do a great job with their characters. The storyline is obviously the forbidden fruit, the forbidden love arc, right? But I think the thing that makes it interesting is that Cece is very subservient to Caroline in this like obsequious, like, you know what I mean, kind of way, right? So she kind of like just like has like this satellite thing going on where essentially it's kind of like how Varys in Game of Thrones has like the little birds and stuff like that, and she has to give like these daily reports to Caroline, you know what I mean, like information requests of like on people, whoever they're trying to spy on. But when she gets with Professor Chadwick, she starts to stand up for herself. She starts to say, oh, hey, I want to go hang out over here. She starts to have a life outside of Caroline. And Caroline doesn't want that. And Caroline obviously does whatever she can to destroy that. But I think the romance between the two, like how they build it up, how they make those two connect with each other, where both of them are kind of like these people who just believe that they can't be loved, you know what I mean? With the professor seeing his wife be this like super sex positive person who left him and stuff like that, doing book tours, or the fact that, you know what I mean, Cece's mom paid a tennis instructor to have sex with her in one of the most weird scenarios I've ever heard of in my life. But the two actors have great chemistry with each other, and because of that, I actually cared about what was happening between the two when they were on screen together, and they were just great together. And I think the character was less one note when she was with Professor Chadwick as opposed to being with Caroline. With Caroline, she was kind of just a subservient henchman. Like, she didn't really have anything else. Like, she would try to give the opinions, and then they would get slammed down and stuff like that. So I guess they were building up the fact that she was going to stand up for herself. But I didn't really find those moments interesting with her. What I did find interesting, I think the only moment I really found interesting when she was with Caroline was when I started to realize that, yo, Caroline's been playing me. And she might have been the one who like told and reported the professor as a way to like control me and keep me under her thumb. And our arc really doesn't get completed because like they're obviously trying to go for a second season. Bold of them to assume that. I think what makes her character so compelling is that she thinks that she's going to be spared from the wrath and the machinations of Caroline, when that's just not the case. Caroline will do whatever she needs to do to anyone, and she gets to find out the hardest way possible. Then there's Beatrice, who, I don't know if she's interesting because the character is interesting, but more so because of what she represents and how they portray it in the show. She's like this social justice warrior, but really it's all performative. Like, she doesn't really give a shit about anything that has to do with these people. For the most part, she does everything for clout. Like, in the beginning, like way in the beginning of the show, she's sleeping with Lucien in order to get invited into this like hazing party that the frat is having, but then Lucien kind of just dumps her off, right? And then later on, after like doing protests against Caroline, writing a news article against the Greek fraternity system, she basically makes a deal with Blaze, essentially breaking like a bunch of campus rules just so she can get invited to one of those parties that they're having. And I think that's like super cool that they have like this person, like, look, very much they are making fun of woke people in this, and I think a lot of this is like kind of like making fun of different kinds of people, right? But specifically with Beatrice, they're making fun of woke people. They're making fun of online activists. They're making fun of the people who are just doing this stuff as a performative gesture as opposed to people who really care about it. And I love the fact that she tried to pledge, but then she got rejected, and like now she's been kind of on this crusade, but really she just wants to fit in. And it's a weird thing, like seeing someone who's essentially on the outside looking in, trying to force their way in, but then trying to break the system at the same time. It's like, she's a fun character in the show. She's not like to be taken super serious, but she's actually just a really fun character. But I like the character. I think the character is pretty fun. And if you've noticed, I have not once talked about our main characters. Not a once. The big three of this show, I have not once said anything about them because there's nothing really good to say about them. It's boring. They're boring. And these people, they live in like a consequence-free world. Like, the story wants to make us believe in the stakes, right? They want to make us believe that, oh, hey, you know what I mean? The campus is cracking down on this. This is an imminent threat. This is going to happen. If they don't do something about it, they're all going to get booted out, right? but we never see it. There's like never like a raid or like them in the office with the dean. There's no campus police going over there. There's like random protests from like some students or something like that somebody coordinates, but there's never actually administrative like repercussions for the actions that they've taken. Like there's nothing. I don't believe anything is happening to these people that makes me care, because none of the stuff, like the whole premise of the story is that an incident happens and these people are getting watchdogged by the administration, by the school. Okay, makes sense, got it. We never see the school do anything. We never see anything. We just see them doing stuff, like they're just comfortably moving about after someone just got injured in a hazing incident. And this isn't the only problem with the show. Towards the end of the season, basically Caroline releases a litany of like revenge porn of Lucien sleeping with a bunch of people, right? Like there's the tons of videos of these girls being caught in the act with this guy. Nothing happens. Like nothing happens. Like there's no immediate ramifications. Like you don't see the girls going after him. Like no one cares, dude. Like if someone posted naked pictures and naked videos of you having sex, no one cares. No one's doing anything. There's no consequences for these three people. Like absolutely none. There's never any consequences. And I don't know how I'm supposed to care. Like what's going to happen to this guy? Nothing. They're not going to do anything. Which leads me to Lucien. The character I did not connect with at all. Like he's one note, he's a shtick. So basically this guy like sleeps with a bunch of girls, he's a womanizer, all that stuff, yada yada. And then he supposedly grows a heart by the end of the season for Annie. No, like he's not interesting. He doesn't do anything. There's no arc for him. There's no story. There's nothing. Like, just so you understand, at the end of the season, everyone has a story arc that comes to a conclusion. Everyone else. You know what happens to him? He falls in love with Annie, decides he's not going to sleep with his stepsister, But you know what he does after the argument between the two? He fucks off and fucks his stepmom. That's his arc. There you go. Like, instead of not sleeping with his stepsister, it could have been a really interesting story of like, oh, this guy who's been this womanizer and all this stuff like that, and then finally sees the error of his ways and like says like, oh, dude, you know what, man? I really need to self-reflect and all that stuff. No, he immediately goes and fucks his stepmom instead. And then, in an act of defiance, he shares the video with Caroline. I mean, we don't see that it's the video, but we know, like, you get the implication, like, all right, when you see the shared folder, because that's what they had. But like, that's his arc. That's him. He just sleeps with a bunch of girls. He comes in, he says some witty things, says some pretentious things, says some innuendos, and then fucks off to the next scene. That's his whole character. That's all he did the entire show. And it's really a shame because there are some moments where something happens with him, right? Where you start to learn something about him, or he starts to have to deal with things in the story. Like, when Caroline is being talked down to by her mom and stuff like that at the dinner table or the lunch, and then, Caroline storms out and Lucien takes up for his stepsister and says to the mom, "You're just a wife," and then walks off and then goes and check on her. And they have this really heartfelt moment, where it's kind of like they're the only two that understand each other. And you kind of feel like, oh wow, these people are so fucked up because their parents are fucked up. And it would have been interesting to like kind of explore that mindset of the things that they went through. Like they mentioned in the story that his mom hung herself and he found her hanging, and that would have been a really interesting way to get like an introspective of the character of like, oh wow, is this the mindset that he has? Does he have these abandonment issues that force him to like film these women and have these keepsakes, which is the videos, like these toys or these tokens or these trophies? And that would have been a really interesting thing to explore. It would have been really interesting if he explored it with Annie, because let me tell you something, they don't do shit together. He doesn't do shit, she really doesn't do shit, but he doesn't do shit with her. They don't do anything. What do? They just have like random moments where they go to the bar, or they go like get like fake IDs and buy drinks and stuff like that. That's about it. There's no like real adventure with the two, and for you to like position Lucian as this like corrupting person that's supposed to like take this girl and bring her to the dark side, right? It would have made a little bit more sense if there was some dark side shit that she would have to like get influenced by to do, but that didn't happen. It was just, they just hung out. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but the dialogue and chemistry just wasn't there between the two. And a lot of it is because the only person Lucian seems to have any chemistry with is his stepsister. I kind of believe that he wants to do stuff with his stepsister, which is kind of weird to say. But I don't believe he wants to do anything with Annie. I don't even think they are going to be friends. I would not, if I had to jump into this series cold and see these people interacting, I would never in my life say to myself, oh, those two are going to get together. No, it doesn't come out that way. Now, with Cece and Professor Chadwick, oh my God, that chemistry is right there. You see it, you know it's about to happen. You're like, oh, you can feel this coming, right? But with these two, no. It just feels forced. And that's the thing about this character. He feels forced. He doesn't feel authentic even to himself, and it doesn't feel authentic to the story. He's just a womanizing dude that just like does nothing else. Like, he doesn't do anything interesting. The one time or the few times we ever hear anything interesting about the character, or he has the chance to do something interesting, they just abandon the shit. Like, nope, fuck it. He's too interesting. We got to cut it off. But speaking of uninteresting characters, yeah, we got to talk about Annie, dude. What was she supposed to do? Like, she has nothing to do in this story. She just gets dragged off and brought to different places, and that's it. Just has random conversations, and that's it. Like, she's supposed to be this fish out of water that's supposed to like kind of like navigate through this world of like manipulative people, right? And she's like, you know, kind of like doesn't know what's going on. But she as a character, we don't know anything. We don't know her ambitions. We don't know her wants, her needs, her agency. We don't have any of that happening, right? Similar to Lucian, she's kind of one note. Actually, no, she's no note. Like, it's just a blank canvas there. It is completely wooden. And I'm trying to understand what they were trying to do with the character, like what they were trying to make the character become. Because, like, again, her conversations aren't interesting. She's not interesting. She's kind of just a plot device. Like, she's a prop. Like, that's essentially what she is. She's a fucking prop. Like, she doesn't really move the story along anywhere. She eventually pledges. There's like this one scene where I guess it could have led to something where she's supposed to, you know, pledge to Caroline's sorority, but you know what I mean, her mom is like a legacy for another sorority, a rival house, and there was like a little bit of something there, but it wasn't a big deal. Like, the mom, being a good mom, was like, oh yeah, you know, I just want you to be happy, that type of thing, which is great. You don't have to make bad moms everywhere, but like, I don't get what she was supposed to do. Like, she was literally just like a prop. She's there. She's just a random trophy for a plot that had no stakes. What? And I mean, at the end, she does kind of figure out, you know, the veil gets lifted and she finds out that Caroline is just this manipulative liar. Like, she even lied about the story of her mom paying a tennis coach to sleep with her. That was actually Cece's real life story, which is super hilarious. And, you know, I guess her whole thing is that she's gonna be one of the Avengers that goes after Caroline's Thanos the next season, if they get a next season. But I don't know. Like, as far as like this season goes and who this person was that we were presented with, there was really nothing there to latch onto. And it's not the actor, because the actress is good. I think the actress is fine. I just think that they gave her nothing. And when you give someone nothing, it's kind of hard for them to make something. But yeah, like, I mean, there's not really much to talk about this character because there's nothing to talk about. Like, that's how uneventful her story was. And then we get Caroline, the queen bitch of the story, the big bad of the season, essentially, right? And this is the problem that they run into when you don't have stakes. There's nothing to care about her character. She's just mean. That's all she is. She's just a mean person. They do give her a little bit more depth as a character. Like, they actually show how toxic her mother is and how she just kind of like emotionally abuses her and just like stunts her down, and it kind of informs the viewer of to why she's the way she is, like why she's so opinionated but also shuts down anyone else's opinions, why she's so controlling, why she's willing to go to any lengths to succeed, because essentially her mom is pushing her that way, right? And there's a lot you can get from this character about how people deal with trauma and how trauma manifests into like really passively toxic behaviors, and I think that was really interesting, and I think they conveyed that pretty well. I just think that the problem is that because the stakes are so low, because the Annie character is kind of not interesting, and Lucian is one note, this story arc that did have a lot of depth and a lot of intricate details didn't really work. Now, the plotting was interesting, you know what I mean? Like what she did, like the scheming and stuff like that. And I do have to give them credit because the schemes made sense. Like the schemes weren't like so outlandish, like, you know what I mean? Like you just couldn't believe that this could have been possible to achieve. And I think the story would have been better served if her motivation to do the things that she was doing was to just get her mom that exclusive dinner with the vice president, right? As opposed to like tying it to this like Greek fraternity storyline because you had to rope in the other two main characters. I think her by herself could make a good story. Like, what would a child do? Like, what lengths would they go in order to please and appease their parents that are pretty absent or toxic or abusive or anything like that? Like, what would they do in order to get that recognition and validation? I think that is a very interesting story to tell, and I think that person was the person to tell that story. They just tied themselves to this like Greek drama that really led to nothing, and it just felt flat. And it's pretty clear to me that the creators of the show didn't really know how to put these characters together in a longer format. It feels like if this was just a movie or like a 4-episode thing, it probably would have been a little bit tighter, maybe more intriguing, but it really felt like they were just killing time. They were just like, basically, they were just fucking us off for 8 hours just to get to the finish line so they could play Bittersweet Symphony. And all right, whatever. In regards to the ending, the TV show tried. They tried to give us an ending that tied things up while simultaneously giving us a cliffhanger to go into the next season. The thing is, like I said before, and I've said it numerous times in this video, it just wasn't interesting. It just wasn't anything that I think anyone's gonna really gravitate towards. The plot doesn't hit hard enough, the characters don't hit hard enough. None of it really feels compelling enough to bring someone back into another season with these characters. I think they didn't miss the point of Cruel Intentions or the ending of Cruel Intentions. The movie was about a mask that Caroline's character, had to wear in order to maintain this image of purity that she was forced to adhere to because she was a woman, and the disdain that she had for having to keep the facade up while Sebastian got to freely do whatever he wanted. She had to adhere to societal standards while he didn't, or there was no standards for him, right? And in the movie, that mask was never taken down for anyone. The only person that ever got to see her be her authentic self was Sebastian, or Lucian in this case. No one knew who she was. No one knew that she was this manipulative, conniving individual. They just saw her as this prim and proper person. And that's important because when the veil finally gets lifted, when the mask falls off, or better yet, gets snatched off, it is devastating to the character. And her ending ends up becoming both tragic and also kind of freeing because now she is who she is. Everyone knows who she is. But in this show, they kind of miss the point of these characters. And I get you have to make changes and update it for the times. But if you're gonna try to play off the nostalgia and try to reel in some of the people that were fans of the film, you kind of have to capture the essence of what the film was, which is two tragic characters who kind of built up this image of themselves that they had to maintain, and they couldn't do it, and it ended up leading to their downfall. Lucian had all the money, the fame, all the girls, everything, and he was still trying to find more because he was so bored of it. It was not enough for him. Catherine, or Caroline, was tired of being tied to a standard she didn't ask for and hated the people who fit that standard because they made her feel inadequate.
It's alright for guys like you in court to fuck everyone, but when I do it, I get dumped for innocent little twits like Cecile. God forbid I exude confidence and enjoy sex. Do you think I relish the fact that I have to act like Mary Sunshine 24/7 so I can be considered a lady? I'm the Marcia fucking Brady of the Upper East Side, and sometimes I want to kill myself.
And it's not to say that the movie was perfect, because it wasn't. The acting's a little over the top, the dialogue's a little campy. I think when people look back on it and after rewatching it, I think the thing that makes people fall in love with the movie is the ending. I'm going to keep it real. I think the ending montage, the song choice, all that stuff kind of leaves a lasting picture to what we were watching, whether it's fair or not. But I just don't think that the TV show captured it. But anyway, if you like what you saw and you like my reviews, please leave a like and subscribe. Peace.